Associate Provost. Associate Provost for Career Services here at SLU. Our virtual event today will consist of 3 talks from Bayer Climate Corp leadership, the digital farming difference from big picture to small acre, Nikki Davis, VP of Operations, Insights in Aggregate, Geospatial Technologies and Data Layers, Dr. Tom Eickhoff, Chief Science Officer, and the technology behind the difference, Farming's Next Level, and that will come from Matt Shaw, Chief People Officer. As a participant, you will only see and hear the presenters. Therefore, you do not need to turn off your camera and microphone. During this event, you are encouraged to submit your thoughts and questions by using the chat feature. Jyoti will lead and I will assist with responding to your questions and comments at the end of the final talk. Thank you. Please note your first name may be shared out loud. Additionally, only panelists will see your submitted thoughts and questions. Lastly, if you have any technical difficulty during the virtual event, please email Carl Aldrich. I believe he's put his contact information he has in the chat. We will be our best to address any difficulties. Now, with that, without further ado, our first presenter, and I will ask Carl, there we go. Our first presenter is Nikki Davis. She leads and oversees the information technology, strategic innovations and partnerships, portfolio management, communications and sustainability functions, ensuring close connection and collaboration with Bayer Crop Science colleagues to advance the business and deliver new value to customers. Most recently, Nikki served as Senior Director of Science Enabling, where she aligned and integrated science and R&D objectives and initiatives across the organization. Nikki received a Juris Doctorate of Law and a BS in Chemical Engineering. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Nikki.
Thank you very much for the warm greetings. And I know Tom and Matt will reflect these thoughts, but on behalf of all 3 of us, thank you for having us tonight. We hope to share some information that will spark your curiosity and your interest even more so in digital agriculture, along with, of course, specifically more geospatial areas. I am located here in St. Louis. I've been with Bayer Crop Science now for, I think it's coming up on 20 years. And one of the things I'm so pleased about has been watching the evolution of agriculture throughout my career. Agriculture has evolved and agriculture in St. Louis has evolved. You guys may or may not have heard Ken when he was first welcoming us and introducing this afternoon, mentioned the T-Rex Center. And I was down at T-Rex just last week. And I think about all the exciting pieces where, agriculture has evolved from, it used to be Monsanto in St. Louis and like the Danforth Center, and a couple of universities, of course, had engaging research there, and watching the expansion and how we've just really evolved agriculture and the research for it within the last 10 years or so here in St. Louis has been amazing. So with that, maybe next slide, please. Thank you. And so, yeah, so kind of further to my point, we really have watched the evolution of agriculture. When I first joined agriculture at the very beginning of my career, we were really focused on how can we have technology like our traits, more specifically for crop, and solving solutions that were very unique to a region or an area. And throughout that process, we generated data, tons of data, and there was so much information. And we had technology in our breeding organizations where we started doing predictive science to better understand what's likely to come down the pathway. And so that evolution has led to where Bayer really now thinks about agriculture in ways that are so different than what it used to be. So as Jeff introduced, we're in the Climate Corporation, which is the digital farming division of Bayer Crop Science. Of course, Bayer Crop Science is a larger part of the Bayer family of corporations overall. And those include pharma, they include our consumer health area. And all of that is thinking together collectively how we evolve the world. So in the agriculture sector, we've watched data and analytics come on board to really help farmers grow the way they make decisions, to be more precise, to have an evolution of technology to really, generate a yield of the crops that they're growing in ways we've not seen before. So next slide, please. As we've been thinking about the trends that we see that are shaping agriculture today, and they come from an external pressure, and there are so many pieces here, and you'll see 4 of them highlighted. One has been the growing population. The world and the population within it is only increasing. We know that technology, both medical technology, just better health practices overall, have all led to an aging population. We've also seen a change in consumption. If you look at regions specifically highlighting the Asia Pacific region, there's more consumers there of, for instance, products that are like your meat, your dairy products, that has increased. So that's changed the demand. We look at other evolution of consumption. We know that plant-based diets have grown in many other geographies. And just the expanding population and the growing wealth around the world has meant that people have changed their diets. And all of those trends, the growing population, the changing consumption, has put a pressure on our ecosystems like ever before. The one thing that we are always taught is land is the only stagnant in our world. We get no more, right? And we know of some of the changes from climate, from the way that we utilize land, from what we know now about even refreshing land usage, means that there's increased pressure on our ecosystem. So less to more. And so with that, that's really, as anything, I'm a patent attorney by training, by license, by experience. I look at everything innovative in that lens. And, one of the things we say in the patent arena is that necessity is the mother of all invention. And I totally agree with that. And so therefore, we've made significant advances in life sciences, in agriculture, and digital technology has driven a lot of that. And it's all because of those first 3 components that I spoke about. Next slide, please. Okay, so I joined my pathway from agriculture and moved into digital agriculture a little bit over 2 years ago. And on the one hand, we think about digital as coding, as technology, think about software. But when many people start asking the question, how does digital translate into ag? Because on the one hand, many people see those two as very divergent technologies, right? You think about agriculture, one of the oldest professions. People think about being outside, there's soil, it's tractors, it's physical seeds, it's perhaps in some places the application of chemistries to help for our growth. And then we think about digital, and most people think, your technology such as your LinkedIn and software platforms. And so bringing those two fields together, though, there's some real reasons to do so. And some of those are the places where society has really also evolved in the past 10 years. If you think about it, sustainability, we talk about sustainability in today's world in ways we never did before, and that's on a global level. You see companies issuing their own sustainability commitments. We speak about how, I don't know if many of you go into many different companies' websites, whether it's to order food, whether it's to order clothing, they have sustainability sections where you can either source goods that have have been created in a more sustainable manner. They speak about, for instance, having the end-to-end blockchain to let you know how your food has been grown. So those are all things that people care about, we talk about, and we know more than ever before. Food security. Now, that's one of the oldest things in the world, right? We know that wars have been launched all around food security. After all, when someone's hungry, when someone's worried about the next meal, when a nation's worried about feeding their population, that disrupts the world in ways that other things just never can. And so more and more, everyone wants to make sure that in this growing population, with these changes in consumptions, that we have the security of food. And the last one here I really want to point out is climate change. Science shows us that the climate of today, of course, is not what it was 500 years ago. So that means that precious land, those precious resources, we have to know how to use them differently. So the great news is that's where digital comes in. Digital, data, technology, those combined allows us to address some of these greatest concerns and continue to do what agriculture is meant to do, which is to feed the world. So we have access to information to make those sustainable choices. Our growers can compile information, have the data to manage their systems, to manage their resources in a way that allows for us to combine these practices and not do one or the other, but to manage all three. Next slide, please. So now I want to speak to, and great, I didn't know if it was a builder, there we go. I want to speak to, when you think about bare crop science, you say, well, Nikki, what are you guys doing in that play? How are you guys addressing some of those topics that you just spoke about, those challenges that the entire world is facing? And that's another thing too, right? Maybe the impact is disparate right now, but the challenges I just spoke about, they're ours as a globe. We all own those together. And so bare crop science, and especially in our digital farming unit, we're doing a number of key things to have it really help focus upon this. We have an industry leading platform, FieldView, which Tom would share more about that, but it's a method and mechanism for us to be able to help farmers and growers know and manage what's happening on their farms, what's happening on their acres in ways that they never could 20 or 30 years ago, or they did it with notepads and their memories. Using data, using technology, we're able to create digital products that offers what we call digital business models, new business models, which allows us to be able to help growers make decisions. So you want to know, hey, it's 4 years from now, are we going to be facing a drought? Should I think about growing a different type of hybrid corn seed than what I would have chosen because I didn't know there's a drought? Yes, we can help share that information. Hey, in my field, are there places where the soil is more friendly for growth of one type of seed than the other? Of course there is. Hey, we do need to use perhaps some herbicides and pesticides in some of our growth in some of our geographies, but how do we minimize the usage and maximize when and how and using it at the most appropriate times? We have new business models that will help share and speak to that. One of the other areas that I really like to speak about is smallholders. Growing up here in the United States, there was two types of farming for me. There was your huge commercial acres where, farms as far as you could see, you stand out and see cornfields. Then there's what my family did. You had what we would call more of our gardens. We fed ourselves mainly. We had a little left over from friends and family. Then I got to work for bare crop science. And with that, I was able to travel the world in the farming communities. And I got to see smallholders where you had in some places people who had their commercial farms, but they were small. They're less than an acre. They're trying to grow without key technology, without some of even the basic tools that we utilize. And they're growing that to not only to feed their family, provide for all their family needs, because it is a commercial business. So solutions for smallholders look differently than they do for our commercial farmers. We're working in areas to help grow that out. And finally, I mentioned about companies having their own sustainability commitments. We have ours as well. And that's where digital really helps us. It helps us to determine, for instance, going back to what is it the seed that most likely a grower will need to have 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 3 years from now. Well, let's produce that and only that so we can avoid waste. That helps streamlines, that helps drive cost savings up. All of these collectively are ways that we here in bare crop science are using digital to change agriculture. Next slide, please. All right. And so just like any other place in the world, data is driving all of this. And so you may say, well, Nikki, what type of data are you collecting? I'm saying lots and lots of data, right? So we have data, of course, on all of our seed, and even beyond our seed. So we know, I mentioned about, should I use a more drought tolerant hybrid, or will this be one of those seasons I can use a hybrid that doesn't have to withstand as much? We know that from the data we collect. We have commercial farms where we ourselves are doing research and testing, and we collect tons of data on that, and we use that to make those predictions around how will this hybrid perform? Does it do better in drought? To what temperature? When's the optimum time of planting? We have that on all of our physical portfolio. Then you get into our environmental conditions. soil layers, weather layers, right? Using imagery to collect stress levels in fields to be able to make those predictions later on. Our information from hardware, again, we're through some of our field view technology. The field view drive, if you haven't seen it, is one mechanism. Looks like a little hockey puck that we put into a lot of our equipment, but also other equipment manufacturers information. We use the stream data in so we can find what's the planting right, how many acres were harvested, when was it harvested, all that information collectively. And then of course there's sensors. Sensors have transformed the world in so many ways, and agriculture is no different. So all that information collectively is the data that we're able to use then to make some of those recommendations, make some of those decisions, have some of that insight that I spoke to on the last slide. Next slide, please. All right, so climate field view, and Tom, I think, is going a little bit more into it, but I may be wrong. So if so, Tom, talk about it anyway. It's our optimum product that we've had, and you may be familiar with it. It's one that has really been transformative. So as I mentioned, farmers are actually very, very data driven. They were data driven way before technology enabled them to be as much as they were. If you know anything about farmers, most of them have logs and logs. You go into any of their farm operations, into their offices, there's years and years of notebook where they've been collecting which hybrids do they grow, how did it perform, what rate of return did they get on it. I grew up in a household where you couldn't wait to buy the copy of the Farmer's Almanac because you wanted to know, what are we going to be looking like from a weather? What are the predictions that others have made, right? So farmers consume data in ways that I think most people don't know. And so Climate Field View was an opportunity for them to have all that data about all their farms in one place, to be able to have it at a touch of their fingertip, to be able to recall it, to see and gather it that day. They didn't have to wait till, all their daughters and sons who may have been on the field, they came in together and, compiled their notebooks. In combination with that, it's a platform not only to be able to house information, but also so growers can visualize it. They can get those insights. They can look at their acres and say, oh, that's where I'm having a soil sink, or, oh, I probably need to apply more nitrogen here, right? Or water gathers more in that field, which is why I'm not getting that return. Maybe that's a field I can use for some sustainable measure in a different kind of way. And so then you can combine that and some of the recommendations that the team that Tom leads makes for us. We can then really offer these insights that allows farmers to say, this is the best input for me here. I will purchase this seed. I will spray at this time. I need to plant by this date. And all of that gives data-driven decisions that allows them to get more from less, which is one of the challenges I told you we're trying to speak to. So with that, I say thank you. I hope this is an opening and introduction of what Bayer Crop Science in our digital unit is doing, and even more so why we're doing that. So with that, I'll turn over to my colleague, Tom Eickhoff.
Excellent, excellent. And let me introduce Dr. Tom Eickhoff as Chief Science Officer. Tom leads the science organization at the Climate Corporation, where he drives the company's research and development efforts in data science, modeling, sensing, and field research. The capabilities developed within the science organization enable operational insights backed by the integration of vast amounts of real data, real field data, into climate models. Most recently, as the Senior Director of Science Implementation at the Climate Corporation, Tom leads the testing and application of climate science in our global field operations and with our customers, in order to ensure successful execution of science research. Tom holds a BS in agronomy and a master's and PhD in entomology from the University of Nebraska. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Thank you so much. And it's really a pleasure to be with you all this evening to chat through a little bit about all the information Nikki shared. Was a tremendous overview of kind of the landscape of agriculture right now. So we're going to take a few minutes and dive in a little bit deeper and talk a little bit more about, so how does this all come together? What does this really mean for agriculture and for our farmers around the world? And there's really nothing more exciting to me than to be able to see how technology and new innovation changes the way that agriculture operates. I hold that near and dear to my heart because I have two brothers that operate our family farm that's been in the family for multiple generations. And it's really amazing to see, even in the 25 years since I've been there, how much change has happened. I mean, it is really tremendous. And I'll share a little bit about that with you this evening. You'll also notice that I didn't have any reference to geospatial scientists in my background either. So, but we have lots of geospatial scientists on the team. So when it comes to questions, I will answer as best I can, but I won't be afraid to direct you to some of the experts in the company if you really want to get technical. So let the questions fly, please. Next slide, please. I wanted to start here because there is really nothing more impressive, in my opinion, than looking at the change in agriculture over the last 80 to 100 years. And I want to walk you through this because if you ever have the opportunity to see one of these types of demonstrations in person, it is truly impressive. But as many of you may know, the United States Department of Agriculture tracks the average yield for corn and soybeans across the United States, among other crops, every year, and have been for many, many years. And if you look back at the average yields for the United States and associate them with time periods, and just did some very simple math and said, okay, in 1940, how much land did it really take us to produce 10 bushels of corn? And for those of you who may not be familiar, 10 bushels is about 56 pounds of corn. So not a lot, that's one bushel. So 10 bushels is not a lot. And what you see is if you took that and held the 10 bushel constant and the amount of land it took to produce those over these decades, the amount of land has shrunk significantly. And the next question then becomes, well, why? How did we drive that type of change? And it really becomes farmers' willingness to innovate and adopt new technology as partners invented them. If you look at this slide, the jump from 1940 to 1980, there are a couple really key things that happened over that time span. Nikki mentioned plant breeding. Plant breeding in the 1940s, they had what was called single cross open pollinated hybrids. So there really was very little continuity within the genetic makeup of a field of corn at that time. That led to lots of different susceptibilities to diseases and insects. As we advanced with plant breeding and started to identify single cross hybrids, using inbreds to create hybrids, we made advances in fertility practices, in pest management practices. And you can see we more than cut in half the amount of land it took to produce 10 bushels of corn over about a 40-year window. Really impressive. As you continue to walk through time, elements like biotechnology, again, improvements in various pest management tactics, the incorporation of no-till practices or conservation tillage, where you were able to preserve more and keep a healthier soil. All of these things continue to drive higher productivity on essentially less land. As we look forward, 2020 and beyond, that's really where Nikki's vision, she described her vision of how do we continue to advance agriculture in a new way. And let me just say this, there is so much opportunity that still remains. If you look worldwide, there's still 20 to 40% of our crop on an annual basis is lost to various pests, various diseases, weed pressure. So there's still tremendous opportunity to continue to drive the footprint of agriculture, to freeze it and produce more with what we have today, which really hits at the sustainability element that Nikki talked about earlier. Next slide, please. To kind of take this down a level, and folks may not know this, but the national corn growers, they actually hold a yield contest every year, and farmers can go in and submit a plot of land that they grew on their own farm to see who in the United States achieved the highest yield in corn and soy. And this isn't just I took the corner of my field and I took this really small area. They actually have to submit at least 10 acres. So it's a sizable amount of land that needs to produce this. In 2019, we set new records for the United States in both corn and soy production. The corn production winner produced 616 bushel per acre corn. The national average in 2019 was 167. In 2019, they had 190 bushel soybeans. The national average, 49 or 46.9. So you can see the gap that exists between the potential that seed has when it goes in the ground versus what the farmer actually realizes at the end of the year. And I often ask the question of, at what point in the season does the farmer have the highest yield potential? And, you know, to really make people think, when is that? When is that key decision? Well, I will tell you, the most optimal time is right before that seed touches the soil surface, because the second that seed touches the soil surface, Mother Nature starts to happen, and it's on its own to fend for itself against insects, weeds, diseases, everything, too much water, not enough water. All of these environmental factors start to chip away at what the potential of that seed is. One of the things that we're trying to do at Bayer and within our digital ag space is help solve this equation. Yield really is a function of the genetic potential of the seed, the environment we put it in, and the farming practices that surround the decisions that farmer has to make throughout the year. And I think it's really important to understand the motivation of farmers on how much passion they put into these decisions. If you think about, I'm blessed that every 2 weeks Bayer sends me a paycheck. Matt makes sure that that happens. Thank you, Matt. Farmers don't have that luxury. They're banking on the fact that when they put that seed in the ground after they've invested all of the money in seed and crop protection and fertility, that at the end of the year, they're going to harvest a crop that's going to pay the bill. And they maybe have 40 chances in their career to do that. So they put an incredible amount of thought and pressure on themselves to analyze every single decision along the way to ensure that they're providing themselves the best opportunity for a good outcome. Go ahead to the next slide, please. And one of the ways that we can really steer this in a new direction, and Nikki referenced this, is so much has changed in agriculture. You know, no different than when I go out in my car, my phone automatically connects and I can listen to a podcast or whatever I want in my car. Much of our equipment today has almost similar capabilities. Nikki referenced the thing called Field View, and that's that little black circular device in the middle. This was a game changer. This allowed farmers to take that little device, plug it into the electronic system of their tractor, combine, sprayer, and start streaming information from that machine into a computer. Monitoring things like speed, how deep is the seed being planted, how many seeds per acre am I planting, how much volume of chemistry am I putting out, what's the yield that's coming off this field. So all of a sudden you unlock this opportunity to bring in all of this information that now can be very useful in making different decisions, assessing the effectiveness of decisions, optimizing the placement, optimizing all of these elements of variables that farmers have been trying to solve for generations. Next slide, please. And just to show you the scale of what a little device like this looks like, this is just one day in a year where you look at every one of those blue dots is a combine or harvest machine across the Midwest that was streaming data into FieldView. So when you take a step back and think about the amount of technology and innovation that's occurring in agriculture at any point in time during the day, it's incredible. So you literally have hundreds of millions of data points on a 10 by 10 meter grid basis flowing into a singular place where we can start to leverage that information to share back with the farmer on what is a good decision, what's the optimal way that you should treat this land and produce a crop on this land. And I will say, for individuals studying in the space, This is not like monitoring mouse clicks. This is incredibly complex data with lots of variables. You can imagine the spatial variability, the types of nuance you have when you're collecting all of this information off of machines, trying to interpret the impact of the environment on so many different variables. It is a very rewarding and challenging field to work in, just given the opportunity there is to solve the complex problems that exist when you have this types of data at your fingertips. Next slide, please. So when we take a step back and think about this from a geospatial perspective, we really touched thus far on how do machines help us collect more data, and how does a farmer participate in that data collection. That gives us a great opportunity to think about, data directly from the field. But to be honest, if we want to reach individuals globally and all of the potential farmers out there that Nikki mentioned, smallholder as well as global agriculture, you have to take a step back and realize not every region has the amount of infrastructure and data that we may have in certain parts of the world that are more advanced. So things like a soil map that the United States has that is pretty well characterized and pretty accurate to give us deep soils information doesn't exist everywhere else. So in order to unlock the opportunity there is to solve these problems, we have to think about different ways. And one of those is from remote sensing, the remote sensing sciences. So if you think about just from the simplest form of having analysis ready data, being able to take reflectance off of plants, being able to take reflectance off of soils, send that to a device, whether that be a satellite or maybe even a UAV, and turn that into a useful measurement is something that unlocks a huge amount of potential for us going forward. And this becomes a critical part of how our science organization and our entire company thinks about solving these issues, because we know the way to truly scale and have a broad impact is not by having everyone have to go out and collect samples, not by having everyone go out and walk their fields and collect this information, but it's being able to use things like geospatial information to plug data layers into the various models and help us account for the many variables that a farmer is trying to solve for. Next slide, please. So, and you can go ahead and build this out. I think there's maybe 2 to 3 builds here. This is when we start to think about how do you stack this information together. There are many data layers that that we can put into a model. And if you go ahead and click a couple times, I think a few more boxes will show up. And Nikki mentioned that one source for us that is really key is our own research trials. We have an entire R&D organization that, to be honest, is testing products 5, maybe 10, sometimes even 15 years before they go to market. So when we bring a new product to market, while it may be new to a farmer, we actually have a tremendous amount of information that we've already been able to generate. We have really good understanding of that. We have farms that are focused on going out and testing that information and seeing if the assumptions we can make within a model are correct and if they're valid. We have field view data that we can leverage to understand what are the unique attributes of this farm in particular, and how do we match that with the data that we have in our research trials. We also access proprietary data sets so that we can do machine learning and scalable data visualization. We've got lots of tools in our arsenal to be able to do rapid prototyping so that we can iterate on these types of data sets more quickly, more rapidly, so that we don't always have to wait for a full season to happen before we can make a decision and full advancements. And we apply that through various machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence. We've got an incredibly talented group of data scientists that are constantly bringing in the newest and best ways to think about, with all this information at our fingertips, how do we best help that farmer make a decision? And I'll really go back to where we started of there's so many things that are chipping away at that yield. The more data layers we can stack together, the more information we can collect real time to help a farmer make a better decision before it's too late, before it's stolen another yield from that farmer, the better off everyone is. And that becomes the core focus of how do we leverage our geospatial data? How do we solve the really big problems, the really scalable unknown variables that we're trying to articulate into an actionable insight that a farmer can take out and actually do something in their field on a given day. So next slide, please. So at the end of the day, well, Climate Field View at our core, we're a data company. We are trying to help our customers gather and organize data. Much like Nikki said, that's really where they see a tremendous amount of value. I'm generating all this information, help me do something with it. Help me visualize it, help me understand the impact on my own farm. How do I compare that to various fields? But ultimately, putting that data in the hands of data scientists and folks who know their products the best to match our knowledge of our product, our knowledge of the innovation with their knowledge of the field, their knowledge of the specific challenges they're facing, to be able to drive agriculture to kind of that next level of production. So at the core, that's what we're all about, starting with these very unique challenges that each farmer around the world is facing and trying to come up with scalable data solutions that are going to inform the best decision possible to make a farmer successful. So with that, thank you. I think we will transfer to the next speaker.
Yes, yes, and I will please ask folks to please put your questions in the chat. I know I'm having a whole new perspective on farming now, but great information. Our final presenter is Matt Shaw, and he is the Chief People Officer. Matt joined the Climate Corporation in December of 2014 and leads the People Operations team. Prior to joining Climate, Matt spent 16 years at Microsoft in a variety of HR roles across several Microsoft businesses and HR centers of excellence. Matt has a BA in International Relations from Colgate University in New York. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Matt.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jackson. And I feel like the interloper here because I'm actually not in Missouri. I'm joining you all from St. Louis, from Seattle, Washington. But I feel a little bit better because it's already getting dark here, as I assume it is in St. Louis. So we've got that in common. Yeah, a little bit about my background. So as Dr. Jackson said, I was an international relations major, which is akin to being a liberal arts grad, which means you don't really know what you want to do with your life when you graduate. So as I think about where you all are and kind of in the stage of lives that you're at, you're already well advanced than I am. I ended up kind of falling into a software career and spent my first 16 years at Microsoft. And at first I was just really excited because everyone was wearing shorts and t-shirts to work, and I thought, this is great. But over time, I really became excited about the impact that software had on the world. If you haven't read it, there's a great article that's now 10 years old that was written by Mark Andreessen, who's the guy who created Netscape, and it's called Software is Eating the World, and software has revolutionized a whole variety of industries, and agriculture is definitely on that list, and you're seeing some of the changes. And as Tom pointed out, it's hard in ag. It's not just measuring mouse clicks. It's really managing all of these physical elements coming together, and as you'll see a little bit later in my presentation, a variety of different partnerships, but also what an important domain to be in. And that's ultimately why I ended up here. I was looking to really apply the experiences that I've had into a mission that I was excited about, and when I heard about climate and Bayer and some of the things that were going on, I was really excited about it. So I'll spend a little time talking more about some of that technological evolution, but then talk a little bit about what that means for the workforce and for people, because that's what you all are here to kind of decide what you want to do with your lives. So let's go ahead and continue. So I think as both Tom and Nikki said, I think everyone in ag believes that digital is the future of ag. It is such an exciting time right now. We have all of these machines spitting off all this data, and it allows us to do things that we've never, been able to do before. And so, again, how exactly do we harness that in the right way, and what's the right mix that's going to, meld the science with the business and the things we need? That's still very much up for grabs, but it's a super exciting world. And I think one of the struggles is there's so many great ideas and so many greenfield opportunities that it's really about deciding where we can best focus as a business. But just to get a sense of what some of that change looks like, if you go ahead and go to the next slide, you can really think about what evolution has looked like. So I had a chance to visit a farm in Iowa a few years back, and the farmer there said, my grandfather used to harvest this corn by hand. He'd go out with a big bag and start pulling ears off into the bag. And we were standing there next to this $800,000 combine that fast forward from her grandfather, her father, when he drove the combine, that was the most important job on the farm, because you wanted to drive it super straight and not mess up your rows, and you wanted to drive it at the right pace so that your grain cart and your semis and everything else could keep up with that. Well, the $800,000 combine that she was driving, she just had to push in the GPS coordinates and then go sit there, and she could watch ESPN, or her favorite movie while she was out harvesting. And so it's not hard to believe, that autonomous tractors, and so what became the most important job on the farm is now actually a commoditized job. You could even have a machine, go do it. And also, when you think about the demographics that are going on in the industry, so the average age of the farmer in the U.S. is pushing 60 years old right now. And many of kind of the next generation are not that interested in being farming. It's traditionally been a very hard job, or they're excited about the lure of the city or what they want to do. So a lot of families recognize the value that they still have in their farmland, but don't have that next generation to take it over. And so they're starting to rent their land out to professional farmers, and what you're seeing is a consolidation. And so there's other farmers out there that say, okay, well, if I just invest in a little bit more grain storage and maybe that second combine, I could farm their land too. But what happens in that transition is you lose out on the the notion of I've been on my land and I really know it like the back of my hand. As that consolidates, you really don't. You have to use the data to make these decisions, and you have to think about your entire operation. If you're running across tens of thousands of acres in a rental operation, maybe you want to start thinking about, I want to plant a shorter maturity variety on one end so that I can kind of move my combine across the land at the right pace and get all of those done. You have to be able to leverage data to make a bunch of those kinds of decisions. So, just some examples, and I haven't even hit on how the interplay with biotechnology. I mean, if you think about corn, we've been breeding corn together for thousands of years as a species, right? And it takes generations if you manually breed that corn. Well, now we have the capability to be able to go in, pick out the gene we want, put it in the right place, and rapidly accelerate that timing. And now, we're even able to do some of that breeding work, in silico, in some of that modeling in the technology itself, which will further accelerate. And we used to run experiments, on our own plots. Okay, we want to try this. Let's go put it out in a plot and grow it. Well, now we can crowdsource a bunch of that data that's out there and do it at a scale that we were never able to do before. So super exciting. So let's go to the next slide. It's also a much more interconnected world from a development standpoint than ever before. This is not a set of companies out working in isolation, but the digital opens up a whole ecosystem of partnerships in a different way. And so certainly some of the conversations that we've had with your faculty is around, hey, are there research partnerships that make sense, and can we leverage some of the things in academia and in business and back and forth? But just all sorts of ways that different technology can come together. And that's actually great, because when you think about it from a grower standpoint, we like to say that farming is a team sport. And so the ability to bring together lots of different disciplines for a solution on the farm is also the way that they think and they want to work. And so we're trying to create technology that enables that. And I think from a skill set standpoint, if you all get used to working with different kinds of disciplines or different kinds of organizations around, that's the reality out here in the working world. So I think that'll be a great skill to develop. Next slide, please. This is another, just good example of that notion of farming as a team sport. And again, digital is also opening up business models that people have never thought about before. And one of the favorite stories that I like to tell is there's a company in Seattle called Convoy, and they're basically doing Uber for trucking. So if you think about the trucking industry, so a big ship comes into the port of Seattle from China, and it's got all the crates on it. In the past, there were these brokerage companies that would get on the phone, and they would work with trucking companies and say, hey, we've got a ship coming in, can you get some trucks out here, because this is where we've got to do all of our deliveries. And so Convoy says, gosh, there's got to be a technical solution that we can do for that. We ought to be able to do that in an app. And so they're developing software that allows truckers to go figure out when a port is coming and start to stage out their deliveries so they can do it as efficiently as possible, which saves them money, it cuts down on emissions, a whole variety of good stuff. Well, you can imagine that scenario in agriculture as well. You're a big Midwest farmer. You're going to harvest, actually the date that you're going to harvest, or at least within a reasonable range, what kind of stuff you're going to harvest, where you want to bring it. Well, imagine if all of that data is in a platform that's accessible, then the farmer no longer has to drive a semi. And many farmers have semis as money-losing parts of their operation. Now they can open up an API to a group like Convoy and connect a trucking company that's in there. Another example is the insurance business. Today, if you want crop insurance, you have to go through and fill out a bunch of different kinds of forms and work with your insurance provider to get all of that, certified. Well, now if all of your farm data, all of your practice data is in the same place, again, it's as simple as opening up an API and you can send all that information digitally. And also allows the insurance company to potentially think about different kinds of insurance products. You can measure, boy, if the heat got above a certain level on your farm this many days in a year, well, maybe there's a different kind of coverage that we can open up for something like that. So just a really exciting ecosystem coming together here of different kinds of things that we can do. Next slide, please. So what does that mean? Let's keep going. Next slide, sorry. So this is a little bit about some of the jobs that we have in our group today. And as you can see on the left here, we have 4 big offices in the US, but actually are operating on 4 different continents worldwide at the moment. But when you think about our business, there are kind of a couple different clusters. First of all, we have the R&D side of the house, and that consists both of the people that are making the software and the hardware itself. So our hardware product is that drive that Tom was talking about that you can plug into the CAN bus of a tractor. But then software is the main part of our product. And how do we get all of that data in and serve it up to the user so they can make sense of it? As a part of our offering, though, we also want to start to be able to make recommendations to farmers. You saw the Green Valley farm where some of it's green and some of it's red. Well, given that variability, what kind of seed is going to make the most sense on which part of your farm? What kind of fertilizer regime or irrigation regime do you want to put on that? When you plant your seeds, will you get more yield if they're this far apart or if they're this far apart? So again, we can use data science to drive scientific recommendations around all of those different pieces. So science, data science, geospatial, all of that goes into the R&D side of our offering. But then, of course, we need to sell this product as well. So we have a big commercial side of our house, and similarly exciting things going on in the commercial world just in terms of changing the industry. If you think about how sales used to happen, our sales force would go out and work with our dealer network, which were usually people in the local communities that had the relationships with the farmers, and they would sell seed input as well as our software. Well, you can imagine a little bit about how that telephone game, worked, and sort of the expertise that not everyone necessarily had to sell all of those different kinds of products, because selling software is different than selling input. For a long time, the inputs also had higher margins than some of the software. So the software was de-emphasized in some of those conversations. And for some of those dealers, in addition to selling inputs, they also sold agronomic services. And so all of a sudden you were asking them to sell this product that potentially was in conflict with some of the things that they were doing. And so now you can imagine a world where a grower could just download that software from the web, get their data in, easily as plug it in their drive, and all of that stuff gets uploaded. We'll serve them up a bunch of different recommendations that hopefully they like. That'll help them choose their seed and their crop protection regime and figure out how they want to place all of that stuff. And then if they like that, hit the button and it shows up in an Amazon bag on their doorstep. Well, what happens to the dealer in the middle of that whole thing? And so I think we're going to see this entire industry change, and I think the smart dealers will figure out, what they can do to take that same data that we're using and provide differentiated services up and down the value chain. But it's also meant that our sales force has to transform too, and we want to start thinking about, how can we gather information about how people are using the product to help them? And like, hey, they're about to make a seed selection decision. Can we talk to them about a sale that we're having so we can offer an even better deal? Or, hey, can we talk about a different solution with maybe a third-party provider? Maybe we have a drone company that we're working with that supplies imagery in a different kind of a way. So how can we use the way that people work to provide even better service to them moving forward? So lots of interesting thinking going on the commercial side. And then, of course, we have an entire enabling set of functions as well. We have finance folks and HR folks like me. Nikki runs our operations team, which is the building the systems that knit all of this together as well. So lots of different kinds of opportunities that are out there. And I know many of you are focused on science and geospatial, but I think it's good to understand the context of the whole business that you're sitting in, because understanding these trends and how they all fit together, makes the science real in the product. So I think that's it for me. I think we have a good excitement slide there at the end to end on. But why don't we go ahead and turn it over to questions.
Thank you so much. So from Jeff and I here, and from the SLU team, once again, thank you for giving us your evening time and your broader view of agriculture technologies. I must say that the Bayer is a shining example of the fusion that plant science has with data science. I think that came out very clear from all your three talks today. Nikki, when you spoke about enabling smallholders to meet their goals, that your passion comes out there for those small scale farmers. Tom, when you mention about sharing your personal having your two brothers in the farming, I hope no pressure there for you, but I hope that's your motivation to do your best for Bayer so they can help your brothers and the farming community. And I would say, Matt, thank you for educating our student workforce here, or the next generation workforce, on these limitless opportunities in this digital agriculture world. So thank you. We do have a couple of questions. I'll start with the question that our fine colleague Henning asked here. He basically says, what a cool science field this is. What classes should students get into to get a job at Bayer or to work on this field? I know, Matt, you covered this little bit, but can you shed some more light on this question?
Sure. Well, and the first answer is it all depends on where you want to focus. And I think what I wanted to highlight to you is really how many different disciplines are coming together to make these solutions work. And so I think there's room for a variety of different kinds of interests and skill sets to come together. So the first part is really deciding, because I'm under the impression a lot of folks have more of a science background. Tom, maybe I could kick over the second part to you and talk about some of the folks that we have, especially sort of more early in career that get into our science organization.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think, Matt, you framed it up really well. It really does depend upon where your passion is. But just to give you a wide range of examples, there are many folks in our organization that I consider to be applied scientists, that are really in-depth technical experts in the field of agronomy or plant science or botany or plant physiology. I'm an entomologist by training, so depending, you can see that the types of problems we're trying to solve really require a very diverse set of skills from training. And I think what's really exciting is there's probably never been a time in history where agriculture has required the level of diversity it does right now, because we just spent almost an hour talking about how data science is totally changing agriculture. So now the need for data scientists and engineers and analysts, and to really understand how to apply those skills to the problems we're trying to solve in agriculture are critical. So I really would encourage the students to spend some time thinking about, hey, if I look at Bayer, where are they having an impact, and do I have passion there? And I can almost assure you all skill sets are welcome because the company is so large and so diverse in the needs, that there's probably a place. And then, I'd maybe just close that with, one thing is the technical training, but there's also a huge element of the culture that we try to create in Bayer of heavily involved teamwork and engagement and being able to work across a broad set of stakeholders to deliver results. Which extends with formal training, but also the informal training and the opportunities you have to participate in activities or other things during your education that really can help prepare you for what a career in a place like Bayer would provide.
Thank you, Tom. Let's get to second question. These are like two-part questions from Rich. He's asking, can you list some of your climate data partners? Second question is, what data they provide? And there is to be kind of, or third question, what your expectations are from such providers? So let me quickly repeat the questions. Can you list some of your climate data partners? What type of data do they provide? And what your expectations are from such providers?
Why don't I start out a little bit with that, and maybe Tom and Matt, feel free to chime in with that. So very transparently, if you go to our climate.com website, you'll see a list of many of our partners, right? And when we speak about partners, there's many different kinds. As Tom gave more about the FieldView platform, so thank you for keeping my word there, Tom. Not only is it a great chance for farmers to gather their data into a centralized place across their operations, but they use input from many different companies and agencies, right? So like we're a seed provider, but they also have providers of other chemistries, of other field analytics, of other imagery components. And so with that, we have a lot of companies that we partner for that area. So you have companies that are, Matt spoke about dealers and how dealers are changing. There are companies out there that are seeking dealer solutions like your Echelons. You have grain companies. We have companies that work on sensor technology, right? Companies that does imagery like Centera. So there's a lot of different companies that have the ability to leverage our FieldView platform by partnering with us, and they can also offer their insights as well as pass through their data to growers. And in some instances, that gives us the opportunity to gather more data that growers want us to have to collectively, like Tom said, combat some of those challenges that they have and to help them make those solutions that, and Tom, you quoted a statistic that I really like. Most of us, I come to work, couple hundred days a year, have a chance to prove myself. When you're in school, at least one exam or so, or paper a semester. So you have a few times a year to prove yourself. Growers, they have around 40 chances their entire life. And usually that one time a year that all their bets show whether or not they make what they have. And so we have those partners that they're working with as well, soil, equipment manufacturers, all of those that are different partners that we have in different geographies around the world.
Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah, and if I could just chime in, I mean, I think this is a really prescient question because this is something that all industries are dealing with right now. As data explodes, how do you think about, data partners, who gets access to what data, what rules there are around that? So, we have those same challenges in our industry. And the way I like to think about it is, I think we're looking to create solutions that are no different than any other platform provider. So if you think about your phone and the solutions that you could have on your phone, different people have different levels of comfort in sharing data. And generally, when you think about like Google location services or something like that, the more data you're willing to share, the more types of services that you can play into and potentially the richer experiences that you can get. But that also exposes your data to more people and more players, and that has some downside with it as well. So I think we want to provide the same sort of opportunity for growers. Like if you're not comfortable sharing your data, it's your data, you own it. We're going to work really hard to keep it really secure. But if you do want to share it with some of those trusted collaborators, or you do want to potentially open up some of the other business models like the Convoy one I was talking about, we hope to create scenarios where that's an option as well too. But a fascinating part of all industries is figuring out, how do you make that work for customers that have different levels of comfort across that spectrum.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Tom, you want to add any?
I don't know if I can add a whole lot. I think they hit it pretty well. I'd reinforce that. I think about it in a couple of ways. Number one, the farmers want to use field view, and they want field view to be compatible with a lot of different tools that they have at their fingertips. That's obviously a huge driver for some of our partnerships. There's other partnerships, around weather data and satellite imagery that we're using to, one, provide farmers insights, but also to use in our data science purposes as well. So Nikki said, yeah, there's a great list on climate.com to look at the various partners that we have. But again, we've been very, I'd say, proactive in seeking out partners that can, one, help the farmer, and two, help us solve problems.
Thank you, Tom. Our next question is from Professor Flavio Esposito. He is our associate professor in computer science and also advisory board member for GeoSlu. He is asking two questions. One is, could you please educate our students on their internship opportunities, in terms of the cycle or the timelines? Would you like to take that, Matt?
Sure, yeah, I'll take the first part of it. We do have internships in a variety of the different disciplines that I was showing on the slide that I covered. So software development is absolutely one of those. In fact, I think that's probably our biggest source of interns at any given time. The way the program works is, we target people typically in the summers, in between terms, although we do have some programs that are on different cadences, and we bring in people in off times of the year. But generally, you're hired into a team in our organization, and you work with that team over a course of 2 to 3 months, or whatever the tenure is. And so we work really hard at trying to make those real jobs for people too. Come in and do real work. And I think that both makes it meaningful for the students. They're getting real skills. They really get to understand what it's like, and for us, it gives a good chance to assess what the person is about, and whether we think that they would be somebody we'd like to have in the organization. So yeah, we would love candidates. I'd be happy to take anyone that's interested. You're welcome to pass around my email to the attendees here, and anyone that's interested can follow up with me, and I'll get you in touch with our college recruiter. Tom, why don't I throw part 2 of that question over to you, just in terms of research and sharing data.
And I'll let Nikki chime in as well, because I know she's been in these conversations as well. Yeah, I always think there's opportunities to think about these types of partnerships, and when we can find a really good problem that works well. As Matt said, sometimes there are challenges with sharing data and the ability we have to share that information, especially when it's farmers' data based upon the agreement we have. But there's always, spaces that we can find common ground and look for these types of partnerships and solve some of these issues together. I think we've got many examples of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tom, you're spot on. I'll add into that one a little bit. And same thing. Welcome to talk to anyone further about this. We have relationships with companies, both companies and universities, both here in the United States as well as globally, where sometimes some specific challenges we work together collectively on, leverage their key skills or some domain expertise, or even things where we say, hey, listen, having a diversity of thought to an approach differently than what we may have internally is a great way to get at some insight. As Tom mentioned, depending on what the question is and what data we're leveraging to solve it, that can be a limitation. And so there's some things we cannot do, but often some of the challenges you saw, Tom spoke about a number of the different data layers. So if you think about it, a lot of those are from public sources. I see there's a question here about, can a meteorologist play a role in our company? The answer is yes. We have a full weather team under Tom, where we have people who once actually in the middle of a storm here in St. Louis ran to the top of the building. We had to pull him back down because of his passion and love. So meteorologists are welcome. Just do it safely is what I say. But so there's plenty of opportunities where we use public data such as that, soil samples and things around the world to be able to compile and help us solve data challenges. And those are often places where we can partner with an external organization.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I do have a question. I think there are no more questions in the chat. Thank you for kindly addressing all of them, Nikki, Tom, and Matt. My question is, I know, Tom, you mentioned that it takes decade-long or more efforts to get that prototype commercialized and into the field. The climate field view, that particular platform that you have, what was when you were designing it from design stage to the actual, from design to prototype to commercialization, what was that journey like in terms of the timeline or in terms of, R&D challenges? Because our faculty and the student and researchers here, they are doing both basic and applied research, but they are enabling those R&D hiccups, to move into commercialization. So what would be your advice to them for those of our researchers who are developing such platforms, for Bayer in future to adapt, or we co-develop it? What would be your advice to the developers, researchers at SLU?
Sure. No, I'll share my thoughts, and I know Matt's probably watched a lot of this over his time with the company as well, so I'd certainly invite his perspective also. When I referenced the time to develop things, I was really referring to our seed genetics, our biotechnology products, our crop protection products. So it takes an extensive amount of time to, one, build and prove the concept, and then test the safety and work with the regulators around the world to ensure that they see the same level of safety that we do and are willing to adopt it in their various regions. The digital space has evolved much faster, but it doesn't mean that it didn't come without a lot of learnings as well. I think when Monsanto actually acquired Climate to begin with, it was much more focused on weather information and things like being able to use satellite imagery to project into the field and understand the variability. It really wasn't until we started to work deeper and said, hey, there's a lot more opportunity to combine the knowledge that our customers have, the types of information they're sharing with their R&D data. And then I don't want to discount the impact that the field view drive and having that connectedness to the customer really changed the trajectory. So I think, you know, my advice is that I think when you really focus on the customer or whomever you're trying to reach, the best way that you can understand the need, the problems they're trying to solve, and figure out how do I reach them and how do I ensure that they can see my solution and make that simple and easy and reliable is really at the core of being successful. Because if a customer sees value in your product and you're able to provide a simple solution, which all of us as consumers, I think, want, you can be very successful.
Thank you, Tom. Matt and Nikki, would you like to add?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think that was well said, Tom. Yeah, I mean, I think many of our biggest challenges over the course of the last 7 years have been more about business challenges actually than R&D challenges, and also linking R&D cycles with business cycles in the right way. So, you know, one theme, as I was talking about before, is it's important for everyone to really understand the business that they're in and understand what customers are doing so they can make that linkages. There's an old saying that, you know, the best product doesn't always win, but the product that wins is the best product, if that makes sense. So I think that's super important to remember. There's a lot of great technology out there that never actually made it because it was the wrong time. I can talk about my time at Microsoft when we had the phone before the phone and the tablet before the tablet and the watch before the watch, but like it wasn't the right time, and other companies were able to capitalize on that. So I think that's one. You know, if you look at our climate history, the company originally started around weather, and could you leverage the power of cloud computing to help companies understand more about weather? And so Monsanto, looking to accelerate precision agriculture, climate was kind of the closest thing, because the original Climate Corporation, once they decided they wanted to focus on weather, their first pivot was, oh, agriculture cares more about weather than any other industry. Like, let's focus on ag. And so they were working on some insurance scenarios at the point in time that we came in. But, you know, one of the things we learned about weather is we actually had some really good weather technology, and we were able to even do better weather than some of the other weather that's out there. But if you're from a farmer, you know, it was like, hey, you said it was going to rain, you know, 3/4 of an inch, and it rained, you know, 1/10 of an inch more than that. The fact that you were better than whatever the weather forecasts were, it was still different than what they experienced, and so they were still angry, you know, at us as the customer, even though you had better technology than what was available. So it's amazing how short memories are, you know, in that world. And then I think some of the rest of our pivots have been, you know, great. We want to do some interesting, like, recommendations. Not all of those had as much value as we thought. Or, hey, we thought we really want to get this platform thing going. But if you think about Amazon, you know, they had to learn how to sell books before they could sell everything. And so that's kind of where we're at in our journey. We still believe in some of the platform scenarios that we've talked about, but how can we really leverage some of the science capabilities that we have? To create, you know, better solutions, more holistic solutions for our customers today. But it's also a trick, because, you know, some of that science takes a little while to go, and, you know, you can't necessarily just tell your customers, like, just wait a few years, like, we'll have some good stuff coming down the road, just wait. Like, you have to have something that moves the needle with them every season. And in farming, you know, you have those short windows. You have to impress them every season, because if you don't, they turn you off when they go out and farm, and you don't get that chance again to re-win their business for a whole other year.
Thank you, Matt. I see Nikki has been proactively answering some of our faculty's questions on chat. Thank you, Nikki. Jeff, do you have any other question for the panelist?
Actually, I've been sitting here taking it in. Do you have anything else? If not,
I think they have been more than patient with us.
Man.
I know, that's for sure. And I know I want to appreciate the SLU faculty here. Jeff and I truly appreciate them, because they encourage their researchers to join us today. And cannot thank you enough, Nikki, Matt, Tom. Evening time you're spending with us. So thank you. Thank you for that. Jeff, would you like to say closing remarks?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will. And so I want to close with Nikki, Dr. Eickhoff, and Matthew. Thank you all for a very informative and passionate presentation. It came across loudly that you all are very passionate about what you do. And I'm sure that what you said tonight resonated with our students. It's my hope that, and I'm sure Jody will echo this, that this is not our last time working together.
That's right.
We mentioned the hybrid program earlier, and so maybe as things loosen up on your end, because we're already doing things in person, we would love to have you all on campus to meet with some of these folks that were online and those folks who wanted to be here but couldn't. And so with that, I will give you all a chance if you want to say any closing remarks before we go.
I would just quickly say, thank you very much for having us and hosting us. Bayer Crop Science does have a very long history of working very closely with the universities and the educators in our area. And we'd like to continue that. And so thank you for inviting us in. The only other thing I would like to say is to all here today, there's a place in Bayer Crop Science for those who are passionate about making a difference. And so, yes, there's many disciplines, and I know specifically some of the disciplines we were speaking to tonight, but just to know, you can have a journey of a career here that if you want to do well, you're willing to work hard, and like Tom said, you really know how to be a team player. So we look forward to continue to have our conversations, and hopefully we'll see you all out there making a difference some way, somehow in the world.
Thank you. Thank you. You all have a good night. Thanks again, Jeff. Thank you for doing your lion's share in this event today. Today.
I was trying to get out of the way. I wanted to get it to you all and say, hey, let me get out of the way here. But no,
Thanks.
Good stuff.
Yes, we'll stay connected. Nikki, Tom, Matt, Jeff, and I'll stay connected with you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening, all.
Very much. Enjoy.
Bye.